For some time, there has been some trouble with categorizing games as narrative, and although there has been an increase in the popularity and acceptance of playing and analyzing story-based games, there remains a few loose ends to tie up. One of the biggest problems that the narrativist initiative of gaming has faced so far is the difficulty of merging character, more specifically protagonist or avatar, and agency in a way in which doesn't hinder either of the two. The trick here will be to look at the gap between traditional narrative and agency as something that can be consolidated if not completely connected, as opposed to something that scholars and designers must work around. Here, Perlin compares the novel to the video game by describing the difference in POVs. Whereas the novel gets you to relinquish your agency to see things from the protagonist's POV, in a game, the player's agency is typically encouraged. This creates an alleged conflict of interest between the wants of the narrative and the needs of gaming. Keep this concept in mind as it will be important for later on. Now let's take a step back and talk more about a specific way in which agency apparently obstructs narrative. In this quote, Eskelin explains that power-ups are a purely practical way of evolving the protagonist, which opposes the traditional definition of dramatic character. However, I would argue that a gaming trait like power-ups can be designed to have a specific purpose to the story of the game. It can anchor us not only to the game world, but to the fictional reality and the arc of the avatar.
Where am I? What the hell?
It is brave to swim a storm, but to sunbathe on a beach with pirates, insanity. You have the right to take my life. But no, I will also take yours. I am Dennis.
Jason.
Right after the beginning of the game, the death of your brother and Jason's first murder, Dennis, a recurring NPC who acts as your guide through the first act of the game, forcibly tattoos you the mark of the heron, the shark and the spider, all predatorial animals. When Dennis explains that Jason has the right to take a life as others have the right to take his, he is not only explaining the rules of the island, but the rules of the game. Dennis is also addressing the player.
I know who you are, Jason. You are a warrior. And the Tatau will allow for you to reveal your true self.
And thus, when he says that the tattoo will bring out the warrior in you, he is explaining that the power-ups may aid you in your path to beating the game, by adding to and improving the game mechanics and making yourself into this ideal predator that the island and in turn the game wants you to be. This is possible because agency is not only temporal, meaning the player can adapt to his environment in ways in which he can engage and disengage with different modes of play, but also because play consists of constraints which form the rules of the world, which in turn affect the player's mode of play. In his essay about the poetics of the medium, Mateus talks of two terms, material and formal affordances. The gameplay mechanics of power-ups, as well as Dennis's dialogue, act as material affordances, which align themselves to formal affordances such as Jason's arc of violence induced by the nature of the islands or else the plot of the story, and by doing this, it makes the fusion of pre-existing avatar or well-realized protagonist and player a lot smoother, bringing us one step closer to both, simulating something akin to the metaphorical or psychological feeling of transference between protagonist and reader, while retaining a POV that organically matches our avatars, as well as retaining a form of agency with the help of both material and formal affordances. However, the question of arcs might be even more complex than expected.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is? Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change.
Again, the player is being addressed. When Vass says this to Jason, he is not saying it only to Jason, he is saying it to the player too. When the player is stuck on a level but is persistent enough not to give up, he is, according to Vaas, insane. Here, the gap between the avatar and player has been closed again by the mutual addressing of both. Yet, the specific critique addressing the player can only refer to the player's own arc because it relates to the mechanic of respawning, unexplained in-game, which can only be labelled as a material affordance, a mechanic of the game separate to the plot. Turns out the gap between avatar and player has not been completely closed. While deeply interweaved, the POVs remain separate. A relationship dynamic only comparable to that of the Holy Trinity. They are one, but also their own entity. The smaller gap leaves enough room for the player to experience transference more in the way in which the reader of a novel experiences it, in a purer way. Vaas is breaking the fourth wall to critique the player's actions in-game, which in turn may be linked to Jason's arc, although not directly. The player's arc lays just outside the magic circle to the point that it's not just him experiencing an avatar's arc, but it's him experiencing his own real-world transformation, which happens to be relatable to the character's arc. Why do you keep playing? What is the end goal of your violence? Admittedly, you could say it is to save your friends, but the player has no real attachment to them, as he does not know anything at all about them until he rescues them. Or if he does know, he knows very little. Thus, I am dubious to label these plot threads as any sort of affordances. Rather, I wish to label them as a representation of the borders distinguishing avatar from player. Furthermore, arcs are not only complex, but also fluid. By the end, the two arcs are joined again. You embody Jason one more time to endure your final test. When the player gets to choose between one choice or the other, it feels like a meaningful form of agency because it tests whether the player, and thus Jason, has learned to overpower his demons. If choosing to kill your girlfriend, you not only become stranded on the island forever, but you also die within seconds after the consummation of the toxic union between you and Citra, who is the personification of your temptation. Choosing to save your girlfriend will lead you to decisively choose life by leaving the island. The getting to save your friend's part, as explained before, is more of a novelty and a symbol of Jason's hope than it is a reward for the player.
I can feel the anger inside me. But I am still somewhere inside me more than that. Better than that.
You get to find catharsis through Jason's good ending, knowing that you yourself have also learned a valuable real-life lesson. Your arc has also reached the good ending. Your agency is not only in the benefit of Jason, but also in your own benefit. You get to prove that you've learned your lesson by choosing to not kill. The player's good ending involves the abandonment of the insanity that Vaas critiques. The power of these dual yet united arcs make the agency of this decision seem so much more important and longer lasting than the player's playthrough. The experience of the game goes beyond the magic circle and into the player's actual life. This is the unique quality that you get when interweaving agency and story properly. This answers Perlin's previous question. Yes, not completely removed, but definitely blurred. And also, this proves wrong the statements that Arcist insists on about story holding gameplay back. Here, it actually does the opposite. It makes gameplay more meaningful by getting the player to reflect on the meaning of the shooting gallery that he often is stranded in, making this game less of a genre-abusing, mindless shooter and more of an artistic experience.